Rich Piana, Riccardo Panini. Richard, the man who invented the world-famous 8-hour arm workout and once the biggest bodybuilding influencer on the planet. Having the best comment section in the world and being one of the most recognizable people probably ever due to his insane physique. And being this massive figure, surely he had some massive numbers to complement his insane physique. So how strong was Rich Piana really? Now, Richard Eugene Piana was born in California in 1970, which is like the best place in the world if you want to get into bodybuilding, and that he did. His fascination with the sport began very early on at just 6 years old, since at the time he lived with his mother in Sacramento, who was also a competitive bodybuilder. Rich then started training much earlier than most people at only 11 years old, and he built himself up over 7 full years before entering his first ever bodybuilding show at age 18. Yes, this is Rich Piana at 18 years old, looking like he definitely has 2 kids and a mortgage, but I digress. Panini competed a handful of times throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, and he won a series of NPC shows throughout his entire career. And he actually built a physique that many look back on, asking how the hell he never turned professional in the IFBB, though he supposedly never gave that thought too much attention, because he wasn't a fan of how competitive bodybuilding worked in practice.
I was growing daily, and the amount of muscle I put on my body was insane. And that was a time where I noticed I had a little bit of stomach growth going on. When I looked at the pictures from the Cal to the USA, my belly button had become herniated. That's when I kind of told myself, like, what am I doing? You know, what am I doing? I'm just doing crazy shit to try to win this contest, and I didn't even win. I got 7th place. I didn't even get a trophy. You know, and I probably spent about 15 grand on that contest, and I had nothing to show for it, nothing. So that was kind of the eye-opener for me, that, you know, maybe this bodybuilding thing ain't all what it's, cut out to be. You know, I started to open my eyes.
At his biggest though, while competing, Rich weighed in at 278 pounds or 126 kilos, while standing at around 183 centimeters, which is just over 6 foot tall. A pretty big guy by any means, and he would eventually get even bigger. Now, many refer to this version of Rich as his prime years, and this was before any use of enhancement oils and all the tattoos, so his physique looked pretty different compared to his later years.
Oh no! They're going to the park! You can't do that to us! What are we gonna do without you?
Now, from his 30s and into his 40s, he also did a lot of other crazy things, like getting married while being carried on a chair in sleeveless suit and had Martin Ford as his priest, and he really lived by his now famous quote, "Whatever it takes." Goddammit. But because he was a true bodybuilder at heart, Rich never prioritized lifting very heavy weights. In fact, his training almost always emphasized what he liked to call the stretch and the squeeze, really trying to milk the stimulus for muscle growth with as little weight as possible, often doing super high volume and high rep work, but never heading down to those super heavy sets like many bodybuilders of his era did. And while this meant that he also never pushed heavy weights while training, at least for a man of his size, that might have played a big role in keeping him injury-free throughout his entire career, only requiring knee surgery once in 2013 from an unrelated accident while doing martial arts. Now, Rich never competed in any sort of strength sport like powerlifting, but apparently he did do squats and deadlifts at some point in his career, even though he trained primarily with machines, cables, and dumbbells according to himself. During an interview with MJ Fitness from over 12 years ago, he claimed that he at some point had a quote-unquote max on all of his lifts. Supposedly, at his best, at no particular point in time, Rich Piana was able to hit a 585-pound or 265-kilo deadlift for a single, which for the gym-bros out there is 6 plates, a 585-pound squat for 2 reps, and his most impressive out of the 3 being his bench press, where he supposedly hit 495 pounds or 225 kilos for 3 clean reps, which would probably put his max somewhere around 240 kilos or 530 pounds, which definitely isn't bad at all considering he used a relatively inefficient technique with a flatter torso and no leg drive. So estimating a squat max of 275 kilos, he would have a theoretical powerlifting total at around 770 kilos, which would actually be 5 kilos above my best competition results. And if you put his bench side by side with other strong bodybuilders at the time like Kevin Levrone and Ronnie Coleman, Rich Piana's strength was actually pretty comparable despite not going heavy much in his own training. Obviously, when you don't train those specific movements or ever do a set with less than 8 reps, then your nervous system will not adapt to the heavy loads. But considering how big the guy was, I'm pretty sure that he would also rack up some decent numbers on those lifts if he ever prioritized them, since he did have a great baseline with all that muscle. However, just because Rich wasn't strong on the traditional power lifts doesn't mean that he wasn't strong elsewhere, because arguably his best lifts were those more commonly used in standard bodybuilding training. For one, there are videos of him out there where he's repping out behind the head skull crushers with 2 plates aside, and in that same interview he did with MJ Fitness, he also claimed to have bicep curled 275 pounds or 125 kilos for 3 reps, which is actually 12 kilos more than the current strict curl world record. Now, there isn't any actual footage to confirm he did these lifts, and knowing Rich, he definitely didn't curl that weight to the strictest of manners. To him, it was just a snack.
I'm having this as a yummy snack because I enjoy it.
But there are videos of him out there where he's cheat curling 2 plates aside for multiple reps, and then later hammer curling what looks like 100-pound dumbbells. And that was arguably way past his prime years after he did those synthol injections, which, according to himself, really messed up his ability to train. And we have more videos showing that even past his 40s, this man was still pretty strong. Like in 2015, at 44 years old, he benched his own body weight, being 285 pounds or 130 kilos at the time, for 24 reps with a pretty clean technique. He also did a bench press challenge with former world record holder Scott Mendelson, where he benched 2 plates for 30 reps pretty easily, and then went on to bench 4 plates for 6. And of course, who could forget his insane desire to get a pump, where he would do sets of 30 to 100 reps, a lot of the time just for the added challenge. And his infamous 8-hour arm workout is probably to this day one of the most well-known crazy high volume workouts there is. Now, even though Rich unfortunately passed away in 2017 after a cardiac arrest and oxygen deprivation in the brain, he is still one of the most recognizable figures in the industry, in a similar manner to what happened after the death of Sis. In fact, I would argue, despite Rich's choices and the type of lifestyle that he lived, he had much more of a positive impact to the industry than many would assume, especially considering he was pushing all sorts of PEDs and he took his own body and health to the absolute limit. But he always seemed like a very genuine guy. He met fans from all over the world, took pictures with everyone who came to his booth, and according to people who actually met the guy, he was always very humble, even though he definitely had controversies of his own. His fan base was and still is arguably one of the most loyal perhaps in the entire YouTube scene. Every comment section on his videos would be filled with inside jokes, references to older videos, and the engagement that he had, especially on the Bigger by the Day series, were similar to that of peak Sam Sulek.
Hello.
Because they were simple and they had pretty much the same layout. He would talk to the camera, he would eat a meal, go to train, flex, and then have some words of wisdom in the car. Like how a cookie doesn't count in your macros because it's just a snack, goddammit. So how well did Rich Piana compare strength-wise to other guys his size? Honestly, not the best, but he was a pure bodybuilder at heart. He stayed injury-free for a long time, and considering he did what he did to exclusively look a certain way, it's not too surprising that his SBD numbers weren't all that impressive for a man of his size. But considering he was still making gains well into his 40s, repping out 4 plates on the bench at the time, the guy was an absolute unit. Now that it's close to 10 years since his passing, you don't hear his name come up that often. But for me and many others who started lifting at around the time Rich was popular on YouTube, he is going to be remembered for a long time. Not for his strength, but for the bigger-than-life personality and the character that he was. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this one, make sure you leave a like and comment down below who I should do next. And as always, I'll see you all next time.
Hey, what's up everyone? The secret to getting big. Well, there isn't much of a secret, sorry.